Welcome to Lecture 4 on Carrier Strategies. In today's lecture, we will be talking about carrier operating conditions, operating strategies, as well as looking at the challenges affecting carrier management. So exactly what is a carrier? A carrier is a person or company providing the service of transporting goods or people. This includes SBS Transit, which operates buses, SMRT, which operates trains, and also SIA, which transports both passengers and cargo. The operating network of a carrier includes any geographic territory where it operates. This could be as small as just a town or a city, and it could also be nationwide, regional, or even worldwide. The greater the territory, the greater the difficulty of managing that network. The first component of a carrier's operating network is of course the assets it owns in order to provide the services that they offer to their customers. This could include trucks, ships, planes, and any associated equipment. These assets are on the move all the time as they're being deployed to meet customer demand in different locations. As such, there is a need for continuous monitoring of customer demand and the asset deployment. One of the issues faced in the deployment of assets is the dilemma of the empty backhaul. For example, when a truck makes a trip from A to B, the return trip back to A is termed as the backhaul. An empty backhaul occurs when there is no load for the return portion of the trip. Why is this a problem? Operating a vehicle empty on a return trip means incurring operating costs without generating revenue. Since it costs almost as much to drive empty as fully loaded, it makes economic sense to minimize empty backhaul, but this is not always possible. The second key component of a carrier's network is of course the people who work for it to provide the services they offer to their customers. These people include pilots, captains, drivers, and any other associated staff. Similar to the assets, the people are also on the move all the time as they're being deployed to meet customer demand in different locations. They usually operate out of sight and sometimes very far from their immediate supervisors. There's also often a high degree of unionization for transport workers, leading to periodic unrest such as strikes when they are dissatisfied with pay or working conditions. The carrier's assets and people are interdependent elements in the network. Both elements must work together to accomplish the delivery of shippers' freight. Technology is often the link that connects both. An operating network is subject to influence on many external factors. Extreme weather conditions such as earthquakes, snowstorms, and typhoon can severely impair a carrier's network. Similarly, human interferences such as traffic congestion, riots, strikes, and acts of terrorism can also bring a network to a standstill. Once this happens, there can be great disruption to society. The network is also subject to the influence of many internal factors. If a carrier has poor people management, as in it is ineffective in scheduling and deployment, this could lead to service failures. If they have unsafe work practices, there could be injuries and even fatalities amongst their people. If they have unsatisfactory pay and benefits, there could be union-led strikes, which could slow down or cripple their network. Ultimately, there would still be great disruption to society. An example of such an incident happened just recently in June 2019, when a 3-week strike by EVA Air cabin crew resulted in the cancellation of 681 flights and cost the airline about US $96.2 million in revenue losses. Over the past years, there have been several other airline strikes, including Ryanair, British Air, and China Air, just to name a few. In managing transport, one of the key considerations is that it comes into direct contact with the general public at all times. Trucks share the roads and highways with buses, cars, motorcycles, and bicycles. Planes fly over populated areas. Trains intersect highways and operate in metropolitan areas. Ships operate on the rivers, and port areas are always adjacent to populated areas. This constant direct contact gives transport operations a great potential in harming many people. Road traffic accidents, plane crashes, and even ship sinking have resulted in countless loss of lives, injuries, and damage to properties. An example is this accident in which at least 50 people were killed when a train derailed in the Democratic Republic of Congo in just September 2019. Deadly transport accidents are common in DRC due to poor infrastructure and lack of regulation. Globally, it is believed that road traffic accidents cause up to 1.35 million deaths per year. In fact, road traffic accidents are now the leading killer of people aged 5 to 29 years. Not unexpectedly, the burden is disproportionately borne by pedestrians, cyclists, and motorcyclists, especially those in developing countries. As safety is obviously a critical factor in transport, it is important for every carrier to have extensive operating rules to mitigate the risk to public safety. This can come in the form of standard operating procedures or SOPs, which spell out how staff should comply with industry standards and produce uniform high-quality output. Furthermore, work instructions or step-by-step instructions also help workers to carry out their routine duties and reduce miscommunications. Each carrier will also find it necessary to establish extensive operating rules to protect the assets, operators, passengers, and cargo from vandalism, pilferage, sabotage, and even hijacking. Some of the measures that carriers can put in place to avoid damage and loss of cargo, as well as injury and loss of lives include 1. GPS fleet tracking to track the whereabouts of the vehicles and staff at all times, anti-hijack vehicles, which come with electronic anti-hijack systems which can lock down and protect the vehicle and driver when under attack, and armed security escorts when their high-value items or HVI are being transported. As discussed previously, many external factors can impact a carrier's ability to perform transport services. As such, contingency planning is essential. Depending on the country or region the carrier is operating in, it may be necessary to have detailed backup plans for various scenarios, such as strikes, typhoons, earthquakes, riots, volcanic eruptions, etc. These backup plans must be accompanied by communication plans to notify and manage all stakeholders, including customers, staff, and even government agencies. Many governments have put in place rules and regulations for transportation companies operating in their jurisdiction, aimed at protecting the safety of the public and the environment. For example, the US Federal Aviation Administration of FAA limits pilots to 8 hours of flight during each 24-hour period, and the UK government limits drivers to no more than 10 hours driving a day. In Singapore, the transportation of petroleum and flammable materials is regulated by the Singapore Civil Defence Force, or the SCDF. First, companies need to submit a Transport Emergency Response Plan for approval. Then they need to get their vehicles equipped with emergency ignition cutoff, GPS tracking, and fire extinguishers. Then their drivers need to be sent for the Hazardous Material Transportation Permit training. For a carrier to operate their operation successfully, it needs to be able to measure the performance. Some key performance indicators often tracked by carriers include transit time from pickup to delivery, consistency in achieving that time, and delivery of damage-free cargo. There are 4 key operating strategies for carriers. Rule number 1 is the rule of efficiency. It is generally most efficient to move anything in a continuous straight line with no circling around or starting and stopping. Examples include non-stop flights and cross-border long-haul trucks. Why is it important not to have a circuitous route and to minimize stopping and restarting? The obvious reason would be reducing fuel costs. The least obvious reasons would be that it reduces engine wear and tear, plus landing costs and parking costs. Rule number 2 talks about optimization of capacity. Ideally, of course, the full capacity of each vehicle on each run should always be fully maximized. Why is this so? The fixed costs of running a truck are relatively constant. Example, licenses, road tax, labor costs, etc. The variable costs vary slightly depending on the actual load. Example, fuel, servicing, loading, unloading. As such, unit cost decreases when load increases. Thus, empty mileage translates into wasted fuel, labor, capital costs, and potential revenue. Rule number 3 talks about optimization of transportation service. Transportation, being a service, cannot be stopped. For the service to be executed, the right equipment and personnel must always be available at the precise time. Technology will facilitate the provision of real-time information to allocate resources, which is the supply, such that customers' needs, which is the demand, can be met. Lastly, rule number 4 talks about the hub and spoke model. This is possibly one of the most important concepts in the transportation industry. Basically, there are 2 components: the hub at the strategic center of the network, and the spokes, which are radiating out from the hub. How does this model compare with a point-to-point model? In the point-to-point model, all points are connected to all other points directly. In the hub and spoke model, all remote points are just connected only to the central hub. Let's look at an example of a courier distribution network in Singapore. There are multiple locations within this network all over the island. If a point-to-point system is used, deliveries need to be made directly from every point to all other points. This will result in many trips crisscrossing the island. In the hub and spoke model, all packages from west are consolidated in the west hub. All packages from the town area are consolidated at the south hub. Twice a day, the packages collected at each hub are sorted. Packages meant for the other region are transported to the other hub and reallocated. This reduces the number of trips performed and removes the possibilities of different drivers crossing paths all over the island. Another good example is that of the Malaysian Airlines domestic flight routing system. From this map, it can be seen that there are 3 regional hubs, KL, Kuching, and Kota Kinabalu. KL is the capital of Malaysia, and the other 2 are capital cities of Sabah and Sarawak. It makes sense that these cities serve as the hubs, as there are more remote locations around them which are then connected to the rest of the Malaysian network. So what are the advantages of the hub and spoke system? New spokes from remote locations to hubs are easy to set up. There is increased connectivity for remote locations. Example, there may not be enough volume for direct flights from a remote city such as Kuantan, but through its connection to KL, it gains connections to all other cities easily. Consolidation results in higher capacity utilization. Fewer routes means easy scheduling, and overall cost should be lower. Of course, there are also some disadvantages. Since the hub is at the center of all activity, a disruption in the hub will result in a major bottleneck in the network. Similarly, delays in any of the spokes can also cause delays elsewhere. Lastly, hub infrastructure can be costly to design and build as it needs to be robust enough to support the whole network. There are a few main challenges affecting carrier management. The most obvious one, of course, is the decentralized structure. A geographically dispersed network requires a constant flow of information for optimal operating efficiency. Everything from customer demand, to manpower deployment, to vehicle routing, weather, traffic, maintenance schedule, all has to be tracked meticulously for operations to flow seamlessly. This can only be possible with good corporate governance in the form of quality documentation of all procedures and instructions, and a good communication structure in place leveraging on modern communication tools such as radio, mobile, and satellite. Secondly, the carrier needs to acknowledge that people is the key to their success. The frontline staff who make up a large proportion of their human resources, such as the drivers, dispatchers, customer service, are in fact the ones who are the most critical. Frontline staff who traditionally have low status are important in shaping the customer's perceptions. Thus, a strong focus on training them for service excellence is key to the success of a carrier company. Last but not least, costing can be very ambiguous for a global carrier. It is often difficult to determine exact costs due to the combination of high fixed infrastructure and asset costs, as well as fluctuating variable costs, which could be affected by seasonality, direction of traffic, and cargo volume, etc. With that, we have come to the end of Lecture 4. See you next time.